Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Lando Norris dominates the Singapore Grand Prix, but the big drama at the end of the race was Daniel Ricciardo in potentially his final race in his Formula 1 career, taking the fastest lap point away from Lando Norris, potentially massively helping out in the grand scheme of things in the championship, his former teammate Max Verstappen against another former teammate Lando Norris. Big questions therefore being raised. Should this be possible for Red Bull to seemingly deploy their fourth car on the grid to actually take a point away from Lando and exclude him the possibility of getting the Grand Slam? Lots of talking points today. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. First of all, a couple of things to mention. We talked about this a while ago. This basically rookie sprint race that they're talking about doing after the Abu Dhabi finale, when all of the F2 drivers are there because they have the F2 finale there as well. All the cars are there, no longer needed to be driven anymore. So basically Formula 1 are saying, hey, let's do an extra race with just the rookies in the cars so they get some chance to show things up. It would be entertaining to see. Apparently that's basically been approved now. One thing that we don't know for sure is true or not though is Valtteri Bottas. There were rumours a couple of days ago, I didn't really talk about them here on the channel, but there were rumours that Bottas had basically signed an extension with Audi and he's going to be there for sure next year. No Colapinto, no Bortoleto, so goes the rumour anyway. But Bottas apparently basically is saying, I heard some fake news about that. That's not true. We're still discussing in this sport until pen hits the paper, nothing's confirmed. My feeling is we're heading in the right direction. So Bottas will probably keep that seat for next year. That is the current rumour anyway. McLaren though came into today massively confident, and I think one of the key takeaways of today's race is that McLaren are going to be quick everywhere and Lando will be the favourite for every single weekend. But based on what happened right at the end of the Grand Prix for Daniel Ricciardo, he can no longer, Lando, simply win everything and win the championship. Realistically, if he does win everything and gets the fastest lap every weekend, he will win the championship. And Max can now get second in every race, in every sprint race, and Lando is not able to win the championship based on what Daniel Ricciardo pulled off at the death of the Grand Prix. McLaren was so confident today they had the fastest race car that they just wanted to survive lap one, even if Max got ahead of Lando off the line. The feeling was from McLaren they were going to find a way to beat him anyway, as they did back in Zandvoort, and it was a pretty similar race to Zandvoort today in many respects. Mercedes, though, they wanted more than just third, fourth. They wanted to go for the win, and as a result, they split the strategies, and they did so in, frankly, a horrible way, as we'll get into over the coming minutes. Their strategy was pretty awful today. This, though, was the start of the race. Hamilton gets a pretty good launch, sends it late on the brakes into turn one, just as he did last year, but Max had it covered the inside line, and Hamilton wasn't able to take advantage of the soft tyres. He was pretty much the only driver on the grid, on at least the front of the field, that was on the softs. I guess the plan was to try and make a move early, maybe off the line on lap one, then see how things would go. But the soft tyres, the medium tyres, could go a good distance into the race, and Hamilton was, well, very frustrated with the strategy that Mercedes eventually put him on. This is one angle of the start where there were so many drivers who were struggling to get their cars slowed down into turn one here. Colapinto, by the way, sent a phenomenal move on the inside. It compromised Albon, and Albon wasn't happy about it on the radio, but I guess he's just not used to a teammate of his actually being competent as of late, it seemed to me anyway, because Colapinto put a phenomenal move on and got himself in a position to potentially score points today, and had there been any incidents further up the field, that would have happened. But yeah, loads of drivers went wide here at turn one. Leclerc and Alonso had to take to the runoff area here, while even Piastri got outfoxed by Hülkenberg early on, but then Piastri got Hülkenberg back, which is critical to his race as well. But Lando finally gets away well. I think if there was one track that he was going to be able to hold on to his lap one lead, it was going to be here in Singapore, and it was very clear from the first couple of laps that this was absolutely Lando's race to lose. He had a lot of pace, and Max was keeping it relatively competitive, but Norris was clearly nursing the tyres in. This was the start of the race, by the way. Colapinto up 4 places, Albon down 4 places, and shortly afterwards his car overheated and he was out of the race. So that was unfortunate for half of the Williams garage, but Colapinto, again, such a stellar job today as we'll get into. But 4 laps in, Norris had a slight lead, had the fastest lap. It was quite clear that the Mercedes was nowhere near the pace required if they wanted to do some damage in the Grand Prix. But Piastri wasn't able to make hay early on, and even at the end of the race, it's not like his pace was especially spectacular. spectacular. So he was pretty much matching the others up front at the end of the race. I guess there was a realization from Piastri towards the end that he wasn't going to catch Max, so it was kind of pointless to really try and just actually get it home, because Norris's drive today was impressive, but it was far from faultless. Lando's drive, despite nearly securing a Grand Slam. On lap 7 though, round about this point in the race, there was a talk on the radio to Lando like, hey, what's your pace right now? How much are you pushing? Can we extend this gap over Max? And that's what they told him on lap 9. They were like, hey, you know, let's try and get a 5-second gap. And his engineer was saying, oh yeah, by the mid-teens, as in like, you know, lap 15, let's get that 5-second gap going. By lap 12, Lando had a 6-second gap. So like the pace in that car, especially on the medium tyres, was absolutely absurd today in the hands of Lando Norris. And I said yesterday, right, the fact that Verstappen, Hamilton, Norris being, you know, the big three drivers of the sport, you can argue. It's obviously difficult to say. The grid right now is pretty damn stacked. Leclerc is there. Alonso is still around. Piastri is making a name for himself too. But there's no doubt in my mind, Norris has incredible pace and is one of the absolute fastest drivers on the grid. As we've talked about before, just mentally, that's where you've got the concerns. Can he lead off the line? He's done that today. Can he go an entire race without brushing the wall? You know, maybe not, as we saw today as well. So, you know, in my eyes, Norris isn't still quite a championship caliber to driver to win a world championship, basically, and I don't think he will. Based on today's results, it is absolutely Max's championship to lose, and Max just did a great job this weekend, right? I think qualifying was crucial yesterday. Max getting second in qualifying put him in position today to hold on, and I think Piastri having a poor quali yesterday meant that he wasn't ever really in position to challenge Max. And even early on, right, Piastri, even though Lando was just dominating out front, Piastri in that dirty air wasn't really able to do much. I think the hope for McLaren was that Oscar would just chill out, preserve the tyres behind Russell basically, and then just hope for a late safety car, which nearly came, but it didn't come. And by lap 16, Norris's lead was at 10 seconds. Like, he was putting a second a lap on Verstappen here. Like, it was absurd how efficient this was. I would also say though, today's race was very dead. No safety cars, no yellow flags even, around Singapore of all tracks. And there is some debate on whether they should have changed that final sector, because the track is probably better with the changes to the final sector. That extra DRS zone, another opportunity to actually make a pass, less of a procession maybe. But still, even with that in mind, the track now has less danger in that final sector because there's no longer the tunnel that would cause all sorts of safety car incidents over the years. But also, the track is maybe less of a driver's track now. It's maybe lost some of its character, I think you'd argue, Singapore. And, you know, it's always been a tricky track to overtake at. It's never produced, it has produced good races, but, you know, it's never usually going to produce an absolute banger multi-way fight for the win where anything could possibly happen, unless the rain comes, as sometimes it does. So there's an argument that maybe the track should, you know, go back to more how it was, where it's tough on the drivers, but the way that it is now, with the changes to the track layout at the ends, it's maybe less of a challenge than it was before. It's less tiring on the drivers. The race didn't last as long. The drivers are in decent form and they're not overheating in the cockpit as much as they used to, so they make fewer mistakes, fewer crashes. You know, I'm not saying I want crashes, but, you know, we haven't had a safety car here in the last 14 years of the Singapore Grand Prix or whatever it's been, and there was not one this year for the first time. That's now 9 races in a row. Like, I've genuinely forgotten what, you know, it looks like to watch Burt Mylander drive around. Fair play to Perez as well, was giving Colapinto a lot of credit, saying this guy's very good, difficult to pass this guy. So, you know, that's kind of similar to what Hamilton said about Lando a few years ago, right, in Austria, where it was like, yeah, Lando, what a good driver, and Perez giving high praise to his compatriot now on the grid. And at this point, Colapinto looked like to be in decent position to score points, but of course, we did have some early stoppers, for example, Hamilton. So Hamilton comes in quite early, and he was clearly preserving his tyres. The mediums were able to do like 40 laps in this race. So the softs probably could have done at least 30. And Hamilton was on the radio to his team being like, why did you stop me now? it's just not ideal because Hamilton had to fight through some traffic, taking some life out of his tyres. And because everyone up front on the mediums was preserving so much, Russell had enough pace in the clear air to actually overcut Hamilton because Hamilton was fighting through traffic in the back, wasn't able really to use his pace, and actually Russell ends up coming out ahead of Hamilton after the pit stop phases. So just an absolute disaster class from Mercedes on Hamilton's strategy. Starting him on the softs, maybe worth a try, I don't know, didn't work out, and then they didn't react in the best way either. They probably should have sent Hamilton longer because he still had the life in the tyres. They went for the early stop, but the undercut didn't work at all because of the traffic they put him in. So it was just a disaster, and Hamilton was correct to say that at the end of the race, his tyres were going to be in serious trouble, right? They'd given him a serious offset, and at the end of the race, he was just an absolute sitting duck for the faster cars behind. So yeah, not a good day for Mercedes, and certainly for Lewis Hamilton starting third. He'd have been hoping for a podium. In the end, he was not even close. He did have this moment with Yuki, broke too late, and he was just like, yeah, the tyres aren't really working as he wanted them to work, but the reality is that there was really no chance of a Mercedes podium today, especially the way that they approached the race in the end, and with Piastri making moves at the end of the Grand Prix. This, though, was full lock-on for Lando Norris, basically locking up into the braking zone at the start of Sector 3, marginally touching the wall on the left-hand side and damaging his front wing. Like, if it was any closer, he could have been in the wall, breaking the front suspension, and it's just one of those moments where Lando was either pushing a little bit too hard or he was just not concentrating quite enough, and has a big wake-up call here. So, and then the team on the radio being like, look, Lando, full concentration. And other drivers hit the wall. Magnussen got a puncture late on by hitting the wall as well. They eventually retired the car. But it was far from flawless today from Lando, right? I mean, he was nearly in the wall there and out of the race, and that's still the thing with Lando, isn't it? That despite the fact that the pace is undeniably there, it was, it wasn't a faultless drive by any means, and it was, it looked like being one of the weaker drives, you could argue, of getting a, Grand Slam, which looked like it was on the cards today. The pace was not weak at all. The pace was mesmerizing, and at one point, it genuinely looked like Norris might drop a minute on Verstappen's head, and Norris could have lapped if he really pushed today, maybe up to like 5th or 4th. Like, the pace was that insane. He lapped everyone up to 7th in the end, Norris, and in the final stint he was chilling so he didn't bit it in the wall. That was part of his plan, basically. So eventually the second round of stops come through. Norris is on the hards. They sent Piastri super long. This was Sainz trying to make progress in the field, struggling somewhat. Leclerc went long as well. He actually did a really good job today, Charles Leclerc. And the Ferrari, again, in a similar way to around Zandvoort, when the McLaren dominated, of course in the hands of Norris, and the Ferrari was not that good in qualifying. They were surprisingly competitive in the race, and had Leclerc qualified better and didn't have the tyre blanket warm-up issue and that type of stuff, then, the Ferrari could have been a real threat today. But Verstappen will be very happy that Piastri was not in position to challenge him, and neither was Leclerc, because Norris was just away and gone, really. Hamilton was on the radio being like, I don't know what we're doing, guys. And I'm sure that a lot of Hamilton's kind of body right now is telling him, let me just get out of here and go to Ferrari ASAP. So Piastri was 36 laps in. The hope here really was a safety car. A safety car right now, Logan Sargent putting in the wall, that would have been great for McLaren and Piastri, but no more Logan Sargent on the grid. So Piastri eventually has to box. He has a massive tyre offset at this point, and eventually does relatively easily pass Hamilton, then gets past Russell, and he had about 18 laps to try and put some time into Verstappen. I think it was obvious it wasn't going to be happening, and at this point Norris again himself was just making sure he actually got to the end of the race. He clipped the wall again. This is exactly, I'm pretty sure, where Russell crashed last year on the final lap of the race, if you guys remember. The wall kind of comes in a little bit more than expected, catches Lando out. He just clips it with the rear tyre, and fortunately for him, no damage on the car, because man, there was like 2 or 3 times today Lando could have crashed of his own doing out of the race, and that really would have been championship over. And understandably, there was lots of criticism on Lando, right? Even this Ferrari news account says, how is this guy in a rocket ship leading by 25 seconds with no pressure, hitting the wall every lap? So, I mean, look, Lando has got to improve on some levels, but as we said multiple times before, the pace is undeniable, and, you know, the World Championship is still alive, but I think just Max did such a great job today and yesterday as well of limiting the damage here, and this was towards the end of the race. Leclerc was charging hard, nearly got past Russell as well as he did Hamilton, and Norris at this point was just trying to keep it out of the wall. But if Norris pushed, I mean, I have no doubt he could have won this race by 40-45 seconds. Like, the car was that good today, and it was like watching Max last year, but genuinely even more dominant, like with the pace that Norris is putting on the field at this point. So it is ominous for the upcoming rounds. Red Bull say they're going to get better. They say they have upgrades in the works for Austin that are going to keep improving the car, and they're going to get closer to Lando. But on this evidence, there's no real reason why Lando can't just win every race. I don't think he will. I think it's highly unlikely, but it's absolutely possible that he can. And obviously Max and the Red Bull's performance, if it still fluctuates, the championship is still on. But at this point in the race, Norris had the fastest lap, and he'd set a pretty competitive, you know, high 134 earlier in the race. Max, there was no chance any of these guys were matching it. However, Daniel Ricciardo, in what looks to be his final race in the sport, we talked about the rumours over the last couple of days, Liam Lawson's coming in, and Ricciardo, while he didn't say it explicitly, after the Grand Prix, when he's talking to the media, he was talking as if his career is over, basically, and talking about how he's, you know, had fond memories of his career, and when he came back, of course, to drive with McLaren, and then, you know, was obviously thinking about what his next step was going to be, and tried to make the transition back here again, make the return to try and get the Red Bull seat. That didn't happen, is basically what he was saying, and just reminiscing on what has been a long and, you know, very impressive career from Daniel Ricciardo. I'm sure we wish him the best in his next adventure. I think it was quite clear that, yeah, it's over, right? Ricciardo's out, Lawson's going to be in after Singapore. Difficult way for his career to end, but it's understandable given the way that the last few years have gone for him. However, he decides to put on the soft tyres and put in a lap which was good enough to take the fastest lap away from Lando Norris. Now, Ricciardo doesn't get a point for that, but it guarantees that Lando doesn't get the point. So, there's a couple of ways to look at this. These were the final results, by the way. Hulkenberg held on for a couple of points. He actually overtakes Stroll, I think, now in the championship again. Good drive from Alonso to pick up some points. You know, Hamilton fell back to 6th in the end. The two Ferraris recovered better than I'm sure they were kind of expecting, and Piastri does eventually get the podium. But, you know, I think Oscar will feel like today, especially given how strong the car clearly was, I'm sure Norris as well will feel, damn, if Oscar just qualified better, I could have put 10 points into Max rather than 7, which could have been a big deal. And it could have been 8 if not for Ricciardo. Now, the question is, it was Ricciardo's last race, more than likely, at RB. Would they have done this anyway? Is it quite a nice send-off for Ricciardo to say, all right, we're going to stick some soft tyres on, off you go, set the fastest lap, and also break the track records because, you know, technically now, because the track surface has changed and everything has changed, basically, that was a new track record for Ricciardo, which will stand until next year, probably, at least track record in the race. The track record in quali was, of course, set by Lando Norris yesterday with the new layout, so maybe they'd have done that anyway. But the feeling is from many, and very understandably so, that Red Bull have effectively used him. Now, I'm not necessarily sure they're on the radio, but RB, they know their role, they know they're the sister team of Red Bull, and they know that sending out Ricciardo to take the fastest lap point away from Norris, because Verstappen was not in position to do so, because Perez wasn't in position either, because he was getting a point, they couldn't use Verstappen because he didn't have a pit stop delta to Piastri, so the only option to take the point off Lando was for one of the RBs to do it, and that's what they did. GP came on the radio to Max and said, you know, you didn't lose that many points that you thought you might have done, good damage imitation, because Daniel, your old pal, picked up the fastest lap there. So it's fascinating, really, and I thought the replies to this tweet as well, I mean, you know, lots of people basically saying it's pretty absurd that this is even possible. I totally get that, right? And this is the point that Zach Brown has been making for some time on whether it should be allowed to have two teams that are effectively fighting for the same goal, because, you know, who knows? Is that 1 point in the championship going to matter? It may well do. At the end of the season, it is possible that Max wins the championship by a point. It's not out of the realms of possibility. Maybe the championship is tied and Max wins because he has more race wins. I don't know. And had Ricciardo not got the fastest lap, it would have been a 1 point win for Lando. Just speculating, but it's possible that this matters in the grand scheme of things. And obviously the point is this an unfair advantage? You know, to be fair, Ricciardo could have done that anyway, right? But especially based on Ricciardo's reaction here, because he said to the media, if Max wins the championship by a point, then I've guaranteed myself a nice Christmas present. So it was clearly like part of the plan for RB to do this to help out Max. And you know, that's expected. We saw it in 2021, but we've not really seen it be necessary since then because obviously Max has been dominating so much that he hasn't needed the help. Now he kind of does need the help. Every point is going to matter for Red Bull and for RB, of course, helping him out as well. But obviously McLaren and Norris aren't going to be especially happy about the outcome because that point could be important down the line. And as I say, Ricciardo's pretty much confirming that he's gone. He says the fairy tale ending that he wanted, the return to Red Bull, didn't happen. But I also have to look back on what it's been, 13 years or so, and I'm proud. And they've done what effectively looks like a bit of a guard of honour for Ricciardo after the race. So yeah, he's done. I mean, that's just how it is. It's unfortunate that we didn't get confirmation maybe before the weekends because it would have been nice if, you know, the send-off was kind of announced or whatever and we could celebrate it. And he got the driver of the day as well, which was nice. But unfortunately, he kind of his last race is kind of like, is he gone? Is he not gone? It seems like, yeah, he's gone. So wishing him the best, of course. What a career that he's had. And obviously ends in a very controversial, a rather dramatic way. So the championship lead is as follows. It's 52 points now with 6 races to go and 3 sprints in there as well. So it's on. It's absolutely possible, but it's kind of getting towards the point where, for me, I feel like Max might need a no score to lose this championship. I feel like if Max just keeps putting in good performances every weekend, tries to maximise the car, whether that's a second, whether that's a fourth, whether that's a third, whether that's a sixth, I think it will be enough. Just because Norris, I don't think, is quite at the level to be able to absolutely maximise it every single weekend. We've seen what Piastri has done recently as well. But 52 points, 6 rounds to go. He needs to put roughly 8.8 points per weekend. Now, that can be 8 points in the race plus a point in a sprint, but if you add up the numbers, it shows that if Lando wins every race, gets every fastest lap and wins every sprint, if Max just comes second, that is now enough to hold on to the championship lead. So if it wasn't Max's to lose before, it certainly is now. It is kind of interesting to note, though, that back in Imola, the points gap was 60 points. And going into this weekend, the gap was 59 points. So in all of these rounds, despite Lando having the fastest car, really, he's still only closed up really by 1 point. But of course, that can all change over the next few rounds. McLaren have actually commented on this now, and Zach Brown has said that he is going to ask questions about this, as I'd expect him to, as he feels like teams should operate independently on a sporting level. And this was an A team and a B team. Adds that it's an example of why he was worried about the joint ownership situation. So now it's affecting McLaren in the championship. There is potentially more reason for him to be able to raise this as a serious concern. But very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.